Thank you so much, Sarah. So, um, so Inge is an associate professor of architecture at UBC, and she teaches design studios in the primarily in the Master of Architecture program, in addition to seminars. And her work often foregrounds very critical contemporary issues around housing. And I think it really, she's one of the leading educators around questions of how to create increasingly just housing for diverse populations in our country. And she explores this with her students in studios and also through research grant funded projects in various forms. Um, she is the founding principal of Air Architecture, and that practice has completed some quite remarkable housing projects in Germany and also in Canada. Some of her projects in the Vancouver area include Turner Dairy, which is an adaptive reuse housing project of a historic dairy facility in the city of Vancouver. Quite a fascinating project in terms of historic preservation and housing infill and achieving new forms of, I would call, sensitive density. Air Architecture also completed a very remarkable project in Vancouver's Chinatown, East Georgia Flats. A remarkable study in terms of creating new housing on a quite narrow historic lot configuration in Vancouver. So, again, how to create something that is responsive to the kind of textures and histories of an existing neighborhood, but finds new opportunities for living. So, in addition to her teaching and active architectural practice, Inge is also quite an activist, I think. And then, of course, Architects Against Housing Alienation, we try to learn from activists, try to be activists. And Inge is certainly an activist in many ways. But one of the exciting recent efforts has all been around the question of how to change egress rules and regulations in Canada around housing. So this how do we achieve a single stair and unleash the potentials that change enables. So Inga's been really at the forefront of that effort. And and also she's someone who's been very active in the Chinatown neighborhood for a very long time, analyzing the existing culture and building forms and remarkable housing in that neighborhood, and just very active and as an advocate and participant in the kind of urban design and thinking and culture of that neighborhood. She's also working on a new book that we're all excited about, which is coming out through Routledge Publishers. And the title of that book is Homing, which is also the title of Inge's talk today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Inge. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. So, should work. Yes. So before I start, I would like to acknowledge that UBC is situated under traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish Nation, on which we come together, learn, and share our thoughts today. And as Matthew has already mentioned, as an activist, I would like to take this opportunity to commit myself to the struggle against the systems of oppression that have dispossessed Indigenous people of their land and denied their rights to self-determination, work that is essential to human rights here and across the world. I would like to add one more, and this is the one I want to talk a bit more today about, and that is, as an architect activist, I'm dedicated to decode systems of oppression and inequality embedded in our built environment, protected by common law codes that are harmful to our earth and all its inhabitants. So, what I want to talk today is a bit about introducing what I want to do in the book, or what we're doing with the book, and then how this is connected to research and practice. And again, as Matthew already said, that I'm involved a lot in egress, and there's a reason why. It's not that I'm a technologist. I would rather show you pretty pictures, designing homes, but I realized that to do the kind of homing projects I feel are necessary, we need to change the way we do things. And of course, reductionist and climate is a no-brainer. So I don't want to state what the problem is. We all know we are in crisis. We hear housing crisis, homelessness, lack of connection, climate. We hear it all. We all know it. So my question today is, what can we do as architects? And before I go in, I want to kind of explain a bit. I'm now in year 20 in Canada, but I remember vividly when I first came that I thought, I don't understand. Canada's identity is so much on multiculturalism. And when I study, when I see how we live and how we dwell and how we build, I see monoculture. I see nowhere where we reflect in how we built and that it kind of discusses or addresses that. And so we do everything singular. And in my opinion, there's not so much different between the red on the left and the red on the right in terms of how people live there. It's the single family home, you come with the car, you go in. The apartment, you go in the elevator and you go up in your unit. It's all singular. It's also interesting how they all rely on setbacks. Anything to have anything to do with anyone is regulated that it cannot happen. And we have over time established bylaws, zoning, building codes, financial systems, anything to protect these typologies. And another thing I noticed, which is different from where I come from, which is kind of a setting where the blue is dominant, is that there's such a bad reputation about apartment buildings. And maybe I want to trace back quickly. Probably not too many people have thought about it. Where are apartment buildings coming from? And it's actually very interesting because in France, Versailles and all the castles were actually the prototypes on which they started designing apartment buildings. And now you can see right there, apartment buildings in the European context were not just for a specific group. They were actually very wealthy, to this day, they're very expensive apartment buildings, very expensive apartments within buildings, and a lot of wealthy people live in apartment buildings. And when I came here, I noticed that there's a stigma about living in an apartment building. You didn't make it to the single family home, so it's the other. And then when I researched, I noticed that right from the beginning, also in Chicago and wherever there was the housing crisis around the 19th century, apartment buildings were to house poor people. But there was hardly any that apartment buildings were meant for the wealthy. And I think this stigma has stuck a long time. So I'm not talking about my work today, but just that you know where I'm coming from. I've done many and many more mid-size buildings in Germany. And just that you understand that I'm very familiar with them. But before I go more into what I do in practice, I want to introduce the book I'm working on. And it's called A Field Guide to Community Designed Housing. And so what we have done in the last 3 years, I collected 80 projects around the world. Because first we had more European examples, but then Routledge encouraged us to make it broader. And I'm learning more and more about projects which I had no access to before, which is super interesting. And there is definitely patterns emerging. So I want to just show one, and this is the Co-Housing Light project in Vancouver. And kind of how we go about it. So we're introducing the project, we're looking at how much shared spaces, how in relationship to private space. Then this is actually the beginning page, where the beginning page we always highlight something which is a context from the place to be. So this one is where they talk about loneliness in the city, and that 30% are single family homes, and 1 in 5 people in this questionnaire from Happy City said they feel lonely. And so that's just context. And then what you see in the coming pages are, we interviewed all the projects, mostly the people living there, sometimes architects, sometimes both. And we started to bring it in similar ways, in similar forms. So first is the dream, what did they had in mind, what did they wanted to do? And then we go into the process, how they actually went about. So just quickly here, the bottom line, the circle line, the black one, is what normally in this setting, i.e. Vancouver, a housing project would be delivered with a regular development. And then on the blue on top is actually how the co-housing light team engaged, and basically, oops, sorry, basically which part they excluded and which part they took in. So all the marketing and at the end things fell apart or fell away, and at the beginning. So then today I'm not going to go to the individual project, but I wanted to talk a bit about what we discovered looking at all the models. And here I'm having the single family home, the condo, and the rental, pretty straightforward. They're very fixed and have a similar way on how they arrive, and how much input people really have in the design they live. And then you see the blue group is which we try to get categories in all the different projects we found where people are engaged from the beginning. And you see patterns too, that a lot of them are about living models. Some of them are more about financing together, but generally there seems to be a cloud where they all share about living. So then I want to just quickly go and explain a few terms, because maybe you're confused sometimes because there's so many terms used there. Most of them are not defined and used very loosely. So I do this together with a tool we developed. We call it the compass of possibilities. And we decided on 3. Yellow is the engagement in the process, and green is how much they share and what kind of units. And then the blue is the structure, which is on one way the financial and the legal structure. And so we went through looking at co-housing, which I said already, it's very loose because it's not really following a very prescribed pattern in all 3 areas. And on the inside of the circle, and if you can see it, we defined it more clearly, or we divided it more to give character to the circles. I just want to go quickly over it in coming up in the book. And then we have the co-living, which is generally more a rental. So that's why the one circle, the yellow, people are not so involved in making it, but they have more agency in how they live. And the financial, I could also not figure out a clear pattern how that works. In the meantime, I found actually very interesting co-living models, which are actually where people involved in the beginning and ownership. So then quickly about the cooperative housing, and that is something we are more known in Canada, where we have the equity co-op. That is where your own shares, but it's the shares of your unit you're in. And then there is the rental co-op, which you just have a membership, and usually you see the yellow small, not so much involved in the making of it, but very much involved in how you actually operate. Then there's incremental housing. We found 3 projects, and the one in Mexico by Tatiana Bilbao is where the government actually takes on the land to develop the infrastructure, and then people get a spot and they can incrementally, how they have money, build on it. And the government is also helping with the financing, not necessarily giving them money, but the structure of it. So helping them that they can basically build their own building. And then I want to talk about one which is blooming in Europe since about 50 years. And it started with the environmental movement that people said they want to live in healthier environments. And now it has grown to so far that banks accommodate them, cities accommodate them. And I just learned that there's the first university degree to support the process of Baugruppen. So now a quick comparison of the compass, and you start to see how the rental condo, the single family home are very rigid, and the more intensity or the more bigger circles you see, the more flexibility to actually adapt to needs people have. One thing I want to point out here is the Baugruppe is at the end, and on top of it I have Co-Housing LLC. That is a model in the US. I think this is the closest model to the German Baugruppe, but the difference is with the LLC, they actually own the corporation, and then people living in the building rent from the corporation. This is really interesting because what you can do is that empty nesters with more money but need less space have more shares but pay less rent, where a young family can have less shares but pays a higher rent. So that's a tool where you can actually deal with the intergenerational issue. So now I want to show a few case studies, and I'm jumping right back to Germany of a Baugruppe. And what is emerging with the Baugruppe is that there is usually a setup where there is flexibility. There's a rigid structure, which has a lot to do with the environmental concerns and with the building itself. So this one is a CO2 neutral building, has all wood structure, CLT paneled walls. But in terms of building in flexibility to the user and changing of units, we call it a choker room. I didn't make this term, a Swiss group actually did it. And that choker room is for some groups only during the process to fill the units for everyone's needs to be flexible. For some people, it is longer term. So then I bring you to La Borda in Spain. And here that is interesting. It's also a CLT building, but here they left this non-structural 2-meter stripes in the building where same that you can actually change unit sizes either only as long as you fill the building with the Baugruppe, or even later on when needs change, you have unit flexibility. Then I have a project I would like to bring for different reasons, and that is a co-housing project in Denver. And I thought this was pretty cool, that 2 single lots next to each other, what normally is a space where nothing happens because it's a setbacks, you have to have the neighboring unit. They created the social space within this normally leftover space. And the top photo shows you nicely how all of a sudden between in and out, you create this amazing space, which is normally a leftover space from zoning. So then we're going back to Norway, and that's an amazing project. 3 women got together and developed this project. And while they're developing, they were inviting people to come in. But this is actually a combination of co-housing, co-living, mixed co-housing with co-living and apartments. And similar to all the other projects, they're very environmentally concerned. It's also a wood structure. And the blue I showed you in the plans are prefab bathroom systems, which all units actually have the same to make it more efficient. The diagram on the bottom, you see how much shared spaces they have. And the red are inside spaces, and the green are outside spaces. The long one, red one, is actually a restaurant. You see this on the photo on the bottom with a big plaza, which doesn't belong to the project, but the city added it on. And they're talking about that it's not only a community within, but due to the restaurant, it also connects to the neighboring unit, the neighborhood. And what's unique here is that there are some units are extremely small, but there's a lot of, and every unit, no matter how small or large, pays 12% of the shared spaces. Then this is in Mexico, the kind of incremental housing, where people get the opportunity to start small and then fill in as they have the money. And I talked about it earlier that this is supported by a host, a government or non-for-profit, who helps with all the financing, but yet it gets you to private property, not shared. So the next example is Crow Woods. It's a fairly new project I found in around Seattle, and it was initiated by one woman who said she couldn't find any housing she liked. So these were two single lots, and she divided it in three and created a co-housing. And interesting, the buildings were grouped around this this forest, or what was left from a forest, and create a social hub and the environmental hub right in the center. So back to Germany, and again a Baugruppe, and similar what we saw on the earlier one, there is flexibility built within the floor plan, so people can figure out if they want a 4-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, or a 3 and a 3, or however you want to do it. The only fixed thing is, of course, the stair and the service in the center. So this one, interesting, we interviewed, and the students actually even had the pleasure to talk to Sonja. She calls herself self-organized architecture. She works specifically with Baugruppen, and she said she can do this building 30% cheaper than the neighboring building under normal development situation. So the last Baugruppe I'm going to show here, that was actually a leftover triangulated site, which was not set for housing. So this Baugruppe negotiated with the city a 99-year lease of this leftover piece of land. And then they created this pretty interesting spiraling up building. But the idea why they did this, that each unit has framed into nature and a very unique situation. The plan, they have a shared space, right? This is the ground plan, a big shared space. And then there are fairly smaller units. This is also hybrid CLT construction. And yeah, the wood exposed on the ceiling. So these were the examples and where we do research in the book. So now I'm going to switch and go to research in practice. And I bring you to Vancouver. And I first wanted to talk about the project Matthew mentioned already, the Turner Dairy. And hard to believe, but this took me over 10 years to do 13 townhouses. And this is what I want to talk about my research as an activist, not so much about the architecture, but how complicated it is when you break new grounds. And so this is in a single family neighborhood, but of course, the Tornadary was there long before. But nevertheless, now the zoning is very rigid. So I was accused of using this to get more densification. You have no idea how the NIMBYs were lining up at City Hall when I presented. Towers presented in front of me and after me, and very embarrassing, but true. One of the towers which presented with me 10 years ago was finished 3 years before me. So how can that be? And so, well, before I go into this, I want to say one thing what was really exciting about that project, that we wanted to renovate. That was not possible because a lot of the structure was not sound. And so we hired the unbuilders, which took the whole building apart, cleaned the wood on site, and we right away used the same old growth wood to reframe the building. So this is kind of what came out of it. And yes, I had to present 3 times at City Hall because people were worried about too much density in the neighborhood. And what you see here is the first one with the red windows is the old main building. The middle one is the stable, and the back building. And there were originally 3 buildings, but the first photo I showed you, it was kind of connected throughout time with shed roofs. So what I want to talk here about it. So 3 rows of townhouses, you could say, but I couldn't do this. And I tell you in a minute why. So we had to go from part 9, which would be row housing, to part 3, which is exactly the same rules which you need for towers. So then if you see here, I tell you why the issue was. If this would be 2 buildings, I could not have so much glass facing this courtyard. And so you see the added bay windows, which connect over 2 floors, and on the barn side, which we see the green roof on top, it also has a lot of glass. So what did we had to do? What did you had to do? When you see the big industrial gate, this is where in the old days the horses and the milk carts came out. We made a tiny little roof over the gate, which connects the middle building to the outer building. And that is what makes it 1 building. And that is what makes it going from part 9 to part 3. So sounds all not a problem, right? Because now I can do my windows, because if it's 1 building, the distance of windows, of operable windows, or distance of operable is way less. But now comes the problem that I need so much technology, basically everything you need in a 6 or in a 12-story building. So this project is, in my opinion, way over too much technology in, just for that fact that we don't have anything for the middle ground. We only have rules for towers or for single family homes. So the middle building, the barn, is a carved out building because this was one big open shed with really nice trusses. The front and the back building are add-on buildings. And I just wanted to show this quickly, one architecture photo, that even though the building in the middle is totally one big barn, originally with no windows, it is super bright in there due to the carving out of the courtyards and the skylights. So this is what I really wanted to talk about. So while I was working over 10 years on this project, things have changed in the city. We got new, yeah, he can take this off. We got new rules. And so we added on that we can do more on a site. But have a look. The FSR, meaning how much you can build, has not gone up so much. We just make way smaller units. And maybe that is necessary if we know that we actually go the opposite way, that we are in the 50s. We had about 20 square meter a person, and we are now at almost 60 a square meter in average. So maybe this is a good thing that we squeeze tightly. But then I ask, I had to do, because I was way before these changes, I had to do a comprehensive development, which means rezoning, which added another 3 years. So that took a city process of 6 years to get a building permit to do this. And not only did it take a long time, this is also the can you just take this? Not only a long time, it also costs a lot of money. I think it was nearly 500,000 just on the whole process. And so now you have 13 townhouses, you have to divide this, and you see why we cannot make this kind of housing affordable. Something other I wanted to point out, I earlier mentioned how we make these setbacks everywhere and not touch anything anywhere. Of course, with the way I have the courtyards and only could do this because it's a heritage building, I could my buildings are actually past the setbacks, and if I count the green roof, which we saw before in the pictures, has a high quality to how you travel in the building. We have also 54% of open space. So there's different ways how we can do open space, because this is kind of a constant. If you see this, even so we let more building on the side, the open space has to be the same. And now look at the residents. So yes, we have 1.5 FSR, which is way higher than even what we allowed right now. But we could have 30 to 45 people living here compared to the 14. Actually, that's not totally, yeah, to the, no, we have to double it up because this is a single lot and we have a double. But still, it is more people. And anyway, I just wanted to show that how complicated it is when you want to work in the missing, when you work in the missing middle era and all the rules are not made for that. So quickly, a project we did as part of the Plex Appeal exhibition with the Field Collective. And what I learned from Turner Dairy, that these units would be amazing for empty nesters. But of course, first of all, we have super high ceilings in most of it and a lot of stairs, 3-story, lots of high stairs. Not ideal for empty nesters. So that gave me the idea to explore from what I know from Europe and to bring this together. Why could we not do a horizontal units? We could put an elevator in. And yes, we don't have small elevators. I noticed that already, but that doesn't mean we can't have the other places have smaller elevators. And you could have actually 5 units. So the homeowner could actually move in 1 unit and invite 4 of their aging friends, and they could have a joint building there, each their own unit, or an extended family would also be possible. But having the units horizontal would also allow cross ventilation, also allows a quieter side and a louder side, and also gives way more opportunities for lighting. So now I quickly go to Chinatown, and that work actually spans over the whole time I did this other work. And what I noticed here when I first came, I was very excited to see that these old buildings had all the principles which we now discover again about cross ventilation. And then I never forget this, my first tour to Chinatown, engineering student gave a tour and I said, oh, this is so amazing. And he just said, oh no, we have air conditioning. And that is exactly the problem. And we see what happened in 1930. We filled actually the space where originally were courtyards because we had electricity and we felt we don't need it anymore. And of course, shortly after, we decided these buildings are unlivable, and then started new rules, wedding cake, how we cutting from the outside. So I did a lot of studies in this urban, what I called urban acupuncture. And that was really exciting to study all the society buildings. And there I'm want to also connect in another way, in a social way. So it was really interesting to study all these buildings and how smart they were. So generally they had revenue generating on the bottom. Then they had the middle part on most of them is almost hotel room style when people came and that was their family away from home before they went to railroad or gold mining or whatever. But really, these were the first social entity long before mainstream Canada had social entities. They were collecting the money, they were sending it home, they were taking care of things. And another interesting was their social space is actually on top of the building and not on the bottom. So that was also interesting. And so I studied a lot of connection to the shop house and how you have the longer path to your celebration space. And I could go on about what's so unique about them, but what I really want to say is I called it also acupuncture because if we save these buildings, then we save the neighborhood because we cannot do the typical lot accumulation and build the towers, which we did on one part. So then I go like my favorite story is when you look at the Chinese character of home and family, it's the same character. And I always said that is my more romantic explanation why this family clan associated buildings don't disappear. But then I could also give you a more rational one, and that is they are owned collectively. And for example, the Yushan Society has 5,000 members. Try and get 5,000 elderly Chinese men to agree on something. So I think these buildings are they are so secure, they're falling apart before they would actually be changed. So then, knowing this, I went like, what can we do if that is what we say, that to save the neighborhood we need to keep the grain of the neighborhood. And so I did study over study, what do we do with the sites which are not society buildings, because they become equally important, that we are not going to put big monsters in and then we just have these leftover buildings. So I did study over study. As soon as the quantity surveyor, the spreadsheet came out, it came out not feasible, not feasible. So finally, when this site was for sale, I took out some of my research projects and developed it into 28 units with a scissor stair, because this is also 14, 15 years ago. I was not, I wouldn't have dared to talk about a single stair. So, but even with this, with the scissors there, it's also not to code and regulation because the two exits to the scissor stairs are way too close. There has to be a 6 meter difference. So again, I think I have at least 4 or 5 alternative solutions in this building to go through the building code. And it took me quite some convincing, and only, I guess, because I did so many studies that the historic buildings are proud up with cornices and not stepping back like a wedding cake, because you cannot do the single lot and do the wedding cake. The wedding cake came because everyone said the building should look like a 25-foot lot, but they're assuming they're going to be 100-meter long. And I'm talking about this in a minute. So now the next one is my present project. And now we are at a single stair. This is a 6-story building. This is mid-block. And that is why I decided to carve out the courtyard as the social space. And the plan, surprise, a bit similar than what we saw in Europe, except the shape is so different, and that's why I had to take it apart, the shape of the site, where we have also the fixed bathroom. And here, very conveniently, it's the buffer zone between the active living and to the courtyard and to the bedrooms in the back. So you walk through this zone and it right away gives you the buffer zone. So it took me a year to convince the city that this is a good idea, because what I have to do is I didn't take the setbacks. I'm stretching out where normally the balconies are. And it's that this is how I carved the space in the middle. And they said they just redid the new zoning guidelines and did not think that was a good idea. But I was persistent and I managed so far to push it along. So what is unique about this floor plan? That you can actually combine it in many different ways. And again, no surprise, that's what you probably saw in the projects I showed you earlier. You can have a family unit with 4 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms and a mortgage helper. You can have 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, and the blue guy, he wants to have something special. He could have 2 units above each other and have more a loft style. So now to this project is on the go in my office, but the city has hired me, and this has not seen the daylight. You're the first one to see this. The city has hired me to compare the different codes and what that means. So the first one is what is the rule until now? 2 staircases. And so this is the Vancouver City bylaw. And that gets us to 15 units and 70%, 75% efficiency. Then we have the new rule, which is just in the process of being established, which is the BC government, which established a single stair. Unfortunately, they want to have the stair 1.5 meter wide, which makes it only saving the space of half a stair, really. And so all of them can only have 4 units per floor, I should say that. And then the third one is actually the one we proposed, is the single stair on the outside and reversing that we have the shared space on the middle and the bedrooms to the outside. In my opinion, this is also, we have this as passive house. You can totally cut the sound out to the street. Also, you have less noise on the street. And I would not let my kid play out on the balcony towards the street compared to having my kid running around in the courtyard and having a shared space there. And the last one is the scissor stair, which is actually coming in not as bad as I thought, but it changes the unit mix compared to the other. So now I'm going to show you quickly how I learned my lesson. I was so happy with my 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms where I can have a 2 and a 1 bedroom. And then I learned that we have new rules that in wood construction, you have to stay 17-inch away from the party wall on both sides. And all of a sudden, I don't have 18 units, 9 2-bedrooms and 9 1-bedrooms. All of a sudden, I only have 14 units, 10 1-bed and 4 3-bedrooms. So this is kind of my struggle right now, as much as I do not want to build in concrete for all the reasons we know about. It's an interesting question, and I'm sure there's a solution, but this is 4 units, and I calculated in terms of revenue. This is probably 100,000 revenue a year less when you do it is in wood construction. So when we calculate how much a building costs, we have to also be mindful on how much money we get after. So that's the initial cost, but then also how you pay back. So now I want to end with going back to Germany one more time. And this is a project similar for the Vancouver rights. If St. Paul's is moving, this was a hospital and the site emptied. And actually a group of people said they want to have like the old blocks, inner green spaces, and single stair development, so individual units, so there can be a diversity of tenors. And so the reason why I show you this, because I wanted to show you more abstractly on the plan. So the left side, the blue, is the hospital site. And conveniently, that site was exactly the right size to compare this to Canada. Because in Canada, right now, we can have, we need two stairs, two means of egress. We actually have two means of egress in Germany too, but we have windows which are operable. That's what we count as the second means of egress. And then the fire truck has a ladder to get to. So on the right side, you have 100 meters between the stairs. And this seems to be the rule how things are developed. They collect the sites because they know how long they can go from one to the second stair if you have to build with two stairs. So now look what happens. On the single stair development, which could look identical when you see it in build shape, except that you don't have as many doors, not so many interaction on the ground. But you can have 66% of family units, probably even more if you want to, where on the red side, we usually get exactly what the city asks for. And here we need to have 35% of family housing. And why is that? Because it's very hard along a double-loaded corridor to do bigger units. So that's usually only in the end where there's the family units. So now what I get asked all the time, are single stair buildings safe? And so I want to show you this. So here I have 6 stairs along the same distance. I would have 2 stairs and a 100-meter hallway. So that means I have 18 homes, and I have 90 homes over here. And the way I calculated it, because these are usually bigger units, I did 4 per unit, and over here I did only 2 per unit because we know they're all small units. So that gets you 72 people per stair in terms of fire exiting if everyone is home. And over here, only half the building, so only 1 stair, you have 180 people to 1 stair. If the fire would be close to 1 stair, you actually would even have more people to go to the other stair. And now look what's really interesting. When you look at the blue, you have 108 units, but you have space for 432 people to live, if you count bedrooms rather than units, compared to 360 people or bedrooms over in the small units. And I think this is a very interesting comparison. And so I want to end with one of my master's students' study, and he took a project which is already 20 years old, 3 33-story towers in Burnaby, and he took the plans and he studies how many units and all of it, and then he used a European block model and compared the two. And you see here, interesting too, you have, even so you cut out, he cut out spaces because he had way more. And I said, no, you have to also give some park space. He has 210 units, ground oriented, compared to 182 units. And in his study, he did really interesting things where he measured how long it takes for a kid to get down the elevator and get down to someone, how long it takes to get to buy things, compared to this mixed use where you have way more ways to mix everything within this block and have shorter distance. So he looked at the embodied carbon. You can do the lower one in wood construction. We're starting to do the towers in wood construction, but I think I would really want to know, and someone doing research, how much carbon do we need to build the towers, and how much, I think, during the time of the building, how much energy consumption we actually need, even so we say we have clean energy. Um, and then, of course, social isolation, which I mentioned at the beginning, I think it's pretty obvious too that the system of the towers is not as interactive than the mixed use on the ground floor. And I think with this, I'm ending this presentation and hope you all got something out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Inga. That was fantastic. Um, I'd like to see, we just have a few minutes to field any questions. So if anyone has a question, feel free to just turn your microphone on and voice it or write in the chat
Mhm.
and we can read it out.
I
Sarah,
have a
I,
question. Yeah, I can dive right in. Inga, thanks so much for sharing your work. It was really great to see it. Especially, I loved in the book how you're trying to qualitatively understand the different components that these housing developments all, you kind of measuring them all against these different features, and that you've started to, consider like the financial, kind of structure behind the project, the participation in the kind of creation of the project, not just the kind of like design quality aspects. But one of the pieces I was thinking about from that and in relationship to your own work that you've showed, I feel like your projects always have such fantastic shared outdoor space in them. And the Victoria project and the kind of courtyard you were describing with it, it sounds like it's going to be really a cool space. So I wonder if there's a way that you're thinking about like the kind of quality of those shared spaces in relation to all of the case studies that you've included in the book, and how that's influencing like the choice of projects that went into the book, or how you measure that in those cases.
yeah, I think what I definitely noticed in most of the case studies, that there's shared outside space. Sometimes it's shared with other buildings, in when there's bigger arrangements, or sometimes it's within the building. And I think what I noticed, what we're missing with this whole setback situation, that it's very hard to carve space out for shared spaces, and this setback outside spaces, nobody really use it, so there's no transition. I think this is where we fall short in the regular rules. I shouldn't even say developer, because it's city rules, it's rules we set out, that we don't have these transition spaces between me and my house community to me and my larger neighborhood. And I think we're really missing this spaces.
Yeah,
And
I
I
like
guess
that Denver example. Like the Denver example was the
I
one you showed
know,
that really made something of that, which was super cool to see.
but to this point where I call myself now the activist, you could not do this here, because the same reason I had with the Turnedary, because the building code would not let you do it because of the window openings too close to the neighbor. So you would have to again make it into one project, which has legally and financial implications. and and but they were cleverly dealing with the zoning, because I think they kept all the zoning rules. Even the little back building has a garage door out of glass, because this is probably what you were allowed to do. So this is really, really clever. But I can tell you, if you would want to do this in Vancouver, you would run into a lot of issues.
Fascinating. Thanks for that.
Any other questions? Anyone in here?
Inga, I have a question. If you, I mean, maybe this is too reductive, but I mean, you've been doing your activism and your advocacy and your design work for a while, and as your presentation kind of described, the sort of obstacles or the code has changed, the kind of cultural disposition and interest around these issues have changed. And it's very fluid and it's very dynamic. If you had to identify the kind of, let's say, top three obstacles at this current moment to, achieving missing middle, socially rich, affordable housing from your perspective? Like, say you're in the midst of this Victoria Drive project. I mean, is construction cost? I mean, we hear a lot about construction costs. Is that one of them? Is it still persistent building bylaw issues? Is it the banks being concerned about that? I'm curious if you had to, I mean, I know there's many obstacles and they're all interrelated, but if you had to identify kind of top three, if you wanted to rally the activists around three specific issues that are really stopping this from happening, what would they be?
Yeah. Uh, I think, first of all, I want to say you could not copy this typology just yet. This is a demonstration project, so there's no rules for this. And what I showed you, the comparison, is Touchwood. That the city embraces it, then we would be the only city. I'm part of the single stair, this part of the single stair group, and this project is part of this as a research. So this is the BC. BC has two entries. One is a smaller one and a 6-story. But you still couldn't do it yet. So it all depends if, I think it's in a month, if the city council adds the courtyard to our new rules, or it will be one of a kind because you would have to go through the same process I'm going through. Alternative solution costs a lot of money. So I'm hoping, and the city, I think, is really on it too, because it also, the numbers show are way better. But that would mean they would have to change their bylaws, their zoning bylaws as well, right? So it's kind of very hard to say. I guess what I want to say is, now that I know, I'm part of changing the building code with the STAIR, the National Building Code. Every 6 years, we change the building code. And for the longest time, developers have no time for this. They don't want to do this. So I think it's up to us, because nobody else can do this. And this is why I call it architect activist. Other people don't understand that. So we as architects have to see, where are we having rules in our building code which hinder us to do things. And so that is what I think, what I realized is, more as long as I'm here, and also realizing that I have power I did not understand before. Every architect can actually put in an application to change something. And then there's every 6 years, every 5 years, there's a review board which actually looks into it, if that will be adopted or not. So, and the city is a bit easier, the bylaws, but still, and to your call, I know it's maybe not answering your question, but every single project I showed you I've done in the city is not following the rules. So I just want to encourage everyone that we not always have to follow the rules, that we can, the building code doesn't say you have to do this. You have to say you have to do this, or prove that what you do is as safe. And I think this is what we keep forgetting, where we always go like, no, we have to do it exactly this. No, we are professionals. We can actually find better solutions if you can prove that this is covering the minimum. Does that somehow make sense?
Yeah, thank you so much, Inga. That's great. I see we have a question in the chat. Lance, would you like to read it out, or would you like, I'll read it out unless you turn the mic on. Okay. Um, so Lance Patrick Sy writes, curious about how the Vancouver projects presented, and in brackets, Georgia Flats, Turner Dairy, Victoria Drive, are received by the local developer community / local housing market.
Well, no developer has come to me and wanted to build one. That's my fast answer. And you know, I want to say one thing. I don't think any of my projects were more expensive than what they built. But I think they shy away from anything which is not business as usual. And of course, the 10-year Turner Dairy, I could only do because it was a private client and they were very emotionally attached to the site and to the building and said they want to give back to the community. There were an immigrant family who said this was how they arrived here. The Chinatown one, I did myself, and it's because I had so much research done. I basically developed the project and then looked for someone, but no following up projects. Following up projects, but not with me. So I'm happy about this because all as soon as someone breaks the rules, the next person can do the same. Without going through the same process. So that's why I want to encourage all of you, when you're out there, that you have to make something which is better, because you also open up the doors for others, not just for yourself. The Turner Dairy is very popular right now, but it was very unpopular during the process because it was way before its time, and people would come to City Hall in flocks and telling me that I'm using the historic building to get more density, and all the city council was sitting there and go, what do you want? This is so minor. This is horizontal densification. What is your problem? But people were coming, ooh, you have a car elevator. My kids cannot play in the lane anymore. And it was unbelievable. But the volume is not significantly bigger than before. Only this huts, I call them huts, or these bay windows I set on top. But the first 4 years, there was a lot of opposition. Now, I don't think there's any opposition. There's a little heart coming.
Thank you. I think unless someone wants to jump in with one last question, I think in the interest of time, I know there's coursework and instruction to unfold. This would be a good time to wrap things up. Inge, thanks for all the amazing work that you do. It's so important and inspiring and powerful. And thanks everyone for joining us today. So big round of applause.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Have a great afternoon and evening, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Clean up time.